Yeah.
I mean, because personally, I've never tried LSD and psychedelics, and I'd almost be scared to, because I don't know if I trust my brain, myself, my subconscious. I feel like without psychedelics, I can have very, I guess, very introspective moments, and I can get myself worked up quite easily. I can think myself into a bad mood or into having anxious thoughts really easily. And I feel like if that was on psychedelics, that'd be like times 10. So I'd be afraid. I'd be afraid of that bad trip going in, and then I'd wonder, would that then influence the likelihood of a bad trip happening even more? Would that be the case?
Yeah, and that's why I have to say again, like it's all about your environment and your mindset. If you go into this in a good mood and you're around people you know and love and are comfortable with, and you feel safe, you're not going to have a bad trip. You can get into these mindset loops of just you're stuck in this like overwhelming anxiety or something, like oh my god. But if you can just pull yourself out of that and move past it, I think that's even stronger, in the sense like if you can learn how to control your emotions when you're high as fuck, it's a lot easier when you're sober, because you've done it at such an extreme degree that you can learn how to process these things easier when you're sober. So once you finally come back, you can take these things that you've learned from your trips and be like, I've been freaking out about this, and really there's no reason to freak out. The universe is just doing its thing, and I'm just a part of it, and it's going to happen whether I like it or not, and I just need to take it one step at a time. And I think that's just one example.
That's so cool, though, to think of it like that. Being on psychedelics just moves that baseline of controlling your emotions up so high that when you're without them, everything's much more manageable. That I'd never thought of it like that, honestly, because everybody gives that stigma around drugs. Like you were saying about how the Mormon church has that kind of stigma around it, that it ruins your life and you're a loser for being on and this, that, and the other. But you're right. Like I think of a lot of notable people that I know of that advocate psychedelics, like Joe Rogan or Bob Dylan. He's kind of a famous example as well. They're all like doing well, really. And they're all like quite successful, and they all do what they want, and they all are really happy. So that's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it that you brought up there, I think. And this, I don't know, would you advocate psychedelics then?
I mean, you see all over online, people like give disclaimers like, I do not advocate taking these drugs and blah, blah, blah. But like you're not going to be able to stop people from doing it. And I don't think we should even have the responsibility of saying these online. We should be able to talk about these things without it being our responsibility, whether people do it safe or not. We should definitely explain how to do it safe and explain that you shouldn't just go into these things without knowledge, because that's how you freak out. You look up, like, for instance, there's this kind of other drug, Salvia, which if you just like YouTube it, you'll look it up, and it's just like Salvia freakouts. People who don't know what they're doing, someone just brings in this leaf and they're like, hey, smoke this, it makes you trip, and then they trip balls. But it's such a different, it's not like psychedelics, it's a completely different chemical reaction in your brain. It's more closely related to opioids, but without the addictive aspects of it. But you see these people freaking out on it because they don't know anything. And for me, like when I got into these things, when I was in college, I wrote a research paper in my English class on LSD and the whole history and how to do it safely and what are the pros and cons and all this, the whole thing of just exploring the idea of it and how to be safe. Because I think that's the biggest thing. You shouldn't go into these things without knowing what you're getting yourself into. It's an entire, you could kill your ego, literally. There's a thing called ego death.
Whoa, where, that sounds horrible.
No, I mean, you don't feel it. I mean, I don't know personally if I've experienced an ego death, but it's like you lose your sense of self. Actually, maybe I have, because with, say, Salvia, my biggest trip I had with it was with my old bedroom. It was like a black wall on the window, and I was smoking out of the window. And when I took the hit, And then I pushed away from my window, and it was like I pushed off into space. And then the window just kept getting farther and farther away, and I was just like floating. And then I went and laid down on my futon mattress bed, and I was just laying there, and I turned off the lights and just had it completely dark, because I heard if your brain has nothing to focus on, it's just gonna make up whatever it wants, because there's nothing in it's not seeing anything to trip on, so it has to make up its own things in the sense. So in this I had my eyes closed and it was just dark, and I started changing into different objects, which apparently is a common thing on Salvia. You change into these different things, like I was changed into a lamp, whatever. And then eventually I stopped, and my futon bed just floating out in space. And then I felt like I opened my eyes and I realized I was my futon bed. In reality, my entire life was a dream, because really I'm a futon bed. And I was fully convinced that I was a futon bed. And then eventually, like the high only lasts like 10, 15 minutes, maybe even less than that. And then you come back. And then I don't think there's been a single time when I've done Salvia where I haven't come back and said, what the fuck? Oh. Because it's such a mind-boggling experience. Like I did completely lose my sense of self, which I guess, is that the definition of an ego death? I'd have to give it a quick Google to see what the actual definition of ego death is. But I definitely didn't know who I was in that moment. I was not Jaden Ruesch. I was a futon mattress.
That's
but
insane.
But then you come back and then you're normal again. And it's this weird, I don't even want to put Salvia in the same category as psychedelics. Like, it is psychedelic, but it's different. And I wouldn't even call it, like, they weren't fun experiences. They were just so weird, and you always come back so like discombobulated of like, what the fuck just happened? But you remember these things. Like, that was just one of the stories. But there's been some, like, I was listening to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and on one of the tracks, like, it's just speeding up, like going like, and like you hear like a train in the background. And there's this weird feeling on this drug where you feel like you need to lay down. Everything just goes horizontal, and you just, I don't think I could stand up if I was on Salvia. Like, you just want to lay down, and you feel this pressure to being pushed to the ground. And I remember feeling like I was being pushed onto a train cart. And I feel like there's so many times where I felt like I was just shoulder to shoulder with people. And they're just right next to me. I'm like, what's going on? And they're just there like, I don't know what's happening. And we're on this train, and the train's going faster and faster through space. And in the song, you hear like a guy laughing. And I was like, who's that guy laughing? I was like, that's the train conductor. This guy's crazy. I got to stop him. So I was trying to sit up from my bed, but I couldn't sit up. And I just had to like, just wait. And I mean, in that moment, like, it sounds scary, but I wasn't scared. I was just in that moment, in that weird sense of what my reality was at that time. And yeah, it's just such a interesting experience. And I guess getting back to like whether advocating these things, I think you just need to be ready mentally. If you think this is something that you want to experience and that you want to explore, I think it's a beautiful thing to explore. You can open up your mind to so many different aspects you've never even thought of.